Hey everyone, Greg Staley here from Diverge Media. Maybe you haven't heard about this, but recently, independent MPP Randy Hillier called for an expedited federal investigation into scientific fraud in public health policies. Now, we've recently started going through his 40-page letter to all the premiers and the prime minister of this country, but it will take some time. In doing so, we released an article today on the first portions of the letter, but the letter itself contains over 40 pages. The letter itself contains 40 pages and over 250 references to medical journals and other articles. So we're taking our time to go through it and truly trying to understand the points made and where they came from. But to our knowledge, to this point, it's been pretty well referenced and researched, and I'm curious to see the comeback from the argument itself and whether there will be an investigation into these things in general. So today our article talked about the points that were made under the first 4 points of the letter. That is that lockdowns originated on the order of Xi Jinping, and that 2 is the imperial model, which by far has been the worst of all the models put together according to the letter, and 3, that the recommendation for early mechanical ventilation was a deadly one, causing deaths in 97.2% of those of the 97.2% of those aged 65 or older, and roughly 76% of those aged between 18 and 65. Dr. Cameron Kyle Siddell had been warning of this in a New York City hospital. He said, "We are operating under a medical paradigm that is untrue. I fear that this is a misguided treatment will lead to a tremendous amount of harm to a great number of people in a very short time. I don't know the final answer to this disease, but I'm quite sure that a ventilator is not it. This method being widely adopted at this very moment at every hospital in the country is actually doing more harm than good." And then we covered up to what we will be going into tomorrow, that the PCR test, as the letter says, is wildly inaccurate. So what we are doing with these articles is we're going directly into the references themselves and looking through the medical literature associated with the letter that was put forward for an expedited federal investigation into scientific fraud. Here's a few of the quotes that we read today that stuck out to me while writing the article. It appears as though the imposition of, quote, "It appears as though the imposition of lockdowns in Wuhan and other areas of China, a nation unconstrained by concern for civil liberties and constitutional norms, started a domino effect where one country and state after another imposed draconian and hitherto untried measures on their citizens." It also says that General Xi is perhaps best known for the punishment of over 1 million CCP officials for corruption, the elimination of term limits from China's constitution, and of course, the re-education and quarantine of over 1 million Uyghur Muslims and other minorities infected with extremism. The letter also calls into question Imperial's modeling data, and it says that Imperial models had larger errors, about 5-fold higher than other models by 6 weeks. This appears to be largely driven by an aforementioned tendency to overestimate mortality. Another point of interest in the letter is as follows, quote, "In March 2020, the Imperial College produced a report titled Evidence of Initial Success for China Exiting COVID-19 Social Distancing Policy After Achieving Containment. For the first time since the outbreak began, there have been no new confirmed cases caused by local transmission in China reported for 5 consecutive days, up to March 23, 2020. This is an indication that the social distancing measures enacted in China have led to control of COVID-19 in China. After very intense social distancing, which resulted in containment, China has successfully exited their stringent social distancing policy to some degree. Imperial College had no way of knowing this is in fact true. Failing to discover cases does not mean that they do not exist, particularly with a virus that is fatal to hardly anyone except the most vulnerable, and a regime with a long history of fraud, and its conclusion directly contradicted that of U.S. intelligence community around the same time that China had intentionally misrepresented its coronavirus numbers. In a December interview, Neil Ferguson recalled how China had inspired his lockdown recommendations to the UK's Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, or SAGE. He said, I think, quote, "I think people's sense of what is possible in terms of control changed quite dramatically between January and March. It's a communist one-party state, we said. We couldn't get away with it in Europe, we thought, and then Italy did it, and we realized we could. If China had not done it, the year would have been very different." Unquote. So those are just a few of the quotes that stood out to us. and that we'll keep bringing these up. Tune into our live stream Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern as we deep dive into this issue further, and we'll give you all that we know on the matter.